Some of us have been talking about the unique timing, the synchronicity we've had with the first two musicals we've used for God on Broadway, Pippin and Carousel. It's been interesting. This week, someone pointed out to me that 2 days ago, October 13th, was the date of the first day of filming The Wizard of Oz, way back in 1938. And you probably have heard about all of the problems and challenges that production had. It went through 5 directors. No one could have imagined that it would become such an influential and iconic film. And no one could have dreamed that a prequel would be written many years later called Wicked, the Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, and that it would be made into a musical and take Broadway by storm. I didn't know much about the show when it first opened in New York, but I knew it had to be something special when I discovered that all 4 of my young children knew every song and all the lyrics. Wicked opened on Broadway on October 30th, 2003. Pretty clever marketing by opening it the day before Halloween, right? And all I need to tell you about its success is that it is still playing on Broadway, setting all kinds of records. When I heard that the story was a prequel to The Wizard of Oz and that it was called Wicked, I assumed that it was about 2 girls growing up in Oz and one becoming the good witch and one becoming the bad witch. How one of them became wicked. But that, of course, is not what it is about. The title is speaking to the way a person is treated in the story. A young woman named Elphaba is treated wickedly because she is green. Yesterday, I was flicking through television channels and stumbled upon an old Western from 1963, and one of the characters was a Native American woman, and she said, "That which is strange is always frightening." And I said, that's Wicked. One of the main points Wicked is trying to get across to us is our tendency to label people, to stereotype, even demonize people who seem different. Wicked is trying to talk to us about racism, about sexism, about classism. If you've seen the show, did you notice how the people in Oz stopped calling Elphaba Elphaba? They don't call her by her name anymore. They label her witch, wicked witch. One of the things we tend to do when we're uncomfortable with people or when we disagree with them is we label them, dehumanize them. It's important as followers of Christ for us not to fall into that trap. Remember when Zacchaeus, who was known by everyone as that short, stingy tax collector, remember how he climbed the tree in order to see Jesus among the crowd? Jesus didn't go over to the tree and say, "Hey, you stingy tax collector, come down." He said, "Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus." He called him by name. "We both need to eat. We're both human. Come down and let's have lunch together." And you know the rest of the story. The man who everyone hated and labeled was transformed by this humanizing experience with Jesus. And so it's important for us to be aware of our tendency to be afraid of that which is different, our tendency to dehumanize in those situations, and our Christian responsibility to see people as our brothers and sisters, to see them as we see ourselves, to humanize them. One thing that helped me in this area, oddly enough, was high school football. I played linebacker, and believe it or not, at high school I weighed 145 pounds. There would be times I would look across the field before a game and see a guy who was 6'3", 6'4", 230 pounds. At first, a feeling of concern would come over me. But then I would ask myself, what's under that helmet? What's under those big shoulder pads? A human being. He's got struggles in school. He's got struggles with his family. He may even be being abused. He may have just broken up with his girlfriend. His father may have just gotten a bad medical report. Was his father even in his life? You see, what I was doing was humanizing him so I would not be afraid of him and would be able to compete. I use this technique to be a better football player. I encourage you to use this technique to be a more loving human being. It's basically learning people's stories, as we so often talk about around here. One of the great moments in Wicked is when we see Elphaba and Glinda, who grew up hating and labeling each other, realizing that their relationship has been a blessing, realizing that they are a lot alike, realizing that they've needed each other and that they've learned from each other as they sing that wonderful song, For Good. Every person has their stuff, their physical, mental, spiritual challenges. They are just like you. So is everyone in this neighborhood, everyone in this city, in this country, in this world. We've heard a lot lately about our country becoming more and more tribal, becoming more and more about us against them and them against us. Our job as Christians is for us to realize and to help others to realize that they are us and we are them. This is probably the most important thing we can do with our time on this planet. Because if we don't do it, we'll destroy each other and this world. And so the people of Oz are acting wickedly towards Elphaba, but it's not only the people doing it, it's the wizard himself. In this musical, the wizard is a very dysfunctional guy. We discover that he's a paranoid dictator trying to suppress free speech. He tries to silence anyone who may speak out against him. But he's a master of propaganda, so the citizens of Oz don't realize how the wizard has manipulated them. They think he's wonderful. And when the wizard discovers that Elphaba has special powers, he hopes to get her on his side. He wants to use her power to suppress the people even more. And when Elphaba first hears about what the wizard is doing, she can't believe it. She's in denial. Can't be happening. She sings a song, it couldn't happen here in Oz. Suppression and intolerance can't happen here. But Elphaba finally realizes the wizard's true intentions. She gets upset. She's determined to fight against him. But with his propaganda and with the public on his side, the wizard spreads lies about Elphaba. He spreads the news that Elphaba is evil, demented. She's labeled the Wicked Witch of the West. You see, this musical even delves into misogyny. And so there are a number of religious, moral, and ethical issues and themes throughout the musical. But the dominant thought that kept running through my mind as I studied the show was the interesting parallels between Elphaba's life and the life of Jesus. Both Jesus and Elphaba were both viewed as different and were rejected by their own people. When he was a young man, Jesus met with the elders and teachers in the temple who marveled at his wisdom. When Elphaba is a young woman, a teacher discovers that she is highly gifted. Jesus is tempted by the devil in the wilderness. Jesus can have everything he desires if he's willing to be on the tempter's side. Elphaba is tempted by the wizard. She can have everything she desires if she's willing to be on his side. Jesus gets angry in the temple and confronts those in power. Elphaba gets angry at the wizard and confronts those in power. And this is when Elphaba sings that wonderful song, Defying Gravity, that ends the first act of the show. The song has a double meaning. It's the first time Elphaba is able to fly, to defy gravity physically. But the second meaning of the song is the dominant meaning. It's about standing up for what you believe in, standing up for doing what is right, being a free and independent thinker and doer, to fight for what is right, even in the face of adversity. Here are some of the lyrics, and as you hear them, see if you can't picture Jesus saying them as he sets his face towards Jerusalem. Something has changed within me. Something is not the same. I'm through with playing by the rules of someone else's game. Too late for second guessing, too late to go back to sleep. It's time to trust my instincts, close my eyes and leap. I'm through accepting limits because someone says they're so. Some things I cannot change, but till I try, I'll never know. It's time to try defying gravity. I think I'll try defying gravity. Jesus' actions against those in power determines his future. He will be persecuted. Elphaba's actions against those in power determine her future. She will be persecuted. Writer Madeline L'Engle once described Jesus by recalling a line by T.S. Eliot, do I dare disturb the universe? Madeline L'Engle reminds us that Jesus was a universe disturber, that it got him crucified, and that to follow his way is to be a universe disturber, and that can make you very unpopular. Elphaba was a lot like Jesus. Elphaba Christ. I sometimes have to remind myself that Christ was not Jesus' last name. Jesus Christ is not a name like Billy Hester. The word Christ is a title. It means Messiah or anointed one. And that's why you may hear someone say Jesus the Christ. They are saying Jesus the Messiah, Jesus the Anointed One. The word Christian means little Christ. Christians are called to be little Christ. Could it reshape or reframe our thoughts and actions if we had Christ attached to our name? Anointed one, child of God. Peter, son of God, anointed one. Janie, daughter of God, anointed one. Jesus told his disciples that they would be like him, that in fact they would even do greater things than he did. And I don't believe he was just talking about the followers who were in his presence. I think he was talking about everyone, talking about you and me, anyone who followed his way. For Jesus was only one Christ, but all of us have the potential of being a Christ. There's more of us than Jesus. We should be doing greater things. Jesus was counting on it. My former boss at Marble Collegiate Church in New York City, Arthur Caliandro, once shared a story about a lovely woman named Georgina, who was a member of Marble for over 40 years. When Georgina died, her husband went through emptied her wallet and found some sayings that described his wife's philosophies of life. On one slip of paper were these words: criticism should be like rain, gentle enough to do good, but not destroy the roots. Another slip: if there's any kindness I can show, let me show it, for I shall see this day only once. And then another: what you do with what you have makes you who you are. And then the last quote he found was one that was often said at Marble Collegiate by one of the church leaders: you may be the only Christ a person will ever see. You may be the only Christ a person will ever see. Think about that and the power you have to change lives. Bill Moyers left the world of politics and felt called to become a journalist. And in 1988, he did a groundbreaking 6-show series on PBS interviewing Joseph Campbell, the great writer and mythologist. In the 20 hours of taping, one of the things Joseph Campbell said is that people say that what we're all seeking is a meaning for life. I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think what we're seeking is an experience of being alive, so that the life experiences that we have on the purely physical plane will have resonances within that are those of our own innermost being and reality, so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive. That's what it's all finally about. Well, a year after that series aired, Bill Moyers was walking out of a restaurant on 8th Avenue between 55th and 56th Streets. By the way, that's right where Sherry lived while we were dating. So he walks out of this restaurant on 8th Avenue between 55th and 56th. He's walking down the street, and a young African-American woman was walking towards him, and their eyes connected as they passed each other. Bill then turned to her a little, and she happened to turn too, and she said, "Mr. Moyers?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Do you have a minute?" He said, "Sure." She said, "I came to New York to be an actress. And I've had a really difficult time. I had some good auditions, but none of them were satisfactory. My boyfriend and I were living together for a year, and then he suddenly left. I haven't seen him. Life just came to an end for me." And she said, "So one night I came home," and she actually pointed across the street to the apartment building. She said, "I went up, turned on the burner. I pulled down the window. I went over and poured a big glass of bourbon. I then laid down on the couch, and I was really ready to go." She said, "When I left that morning, I left my television set on, and I heard these two guys talking about myths and the meaning of life, all of this stuff. And I heard one of them say, 'You think people are looking for the meaning of life?' And the other one said, No, I think they're looking for the experience of being alive." And she said, "Something just snapped in me." And then she said, "And then I heard a voice, the announcer, say, 'Come back next week.' for the second edition of Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell on the power of myth. She said, I got up, poured out the bourbon, turned off the burner, opened the window, and I watched every single one of those episodes. And what I decided is that I don't need to be an actress, but I need to experience the possibility of life every day. You never know when you will be the Christ for someone. You never know when you will be the only Christ someone will ever see. You never know when you will be an instrument of God's peace and love, bringing light and life to others. Bill Moyers never knew he just saved someone's life, but he shared that these kinds of things happened all of the time because of those interviews. One last similarity between Elphaba and Jesus. Everyone thought that both of them were dead and gone. But in fact, they were both very much alive. They, however, both need to leave those they had developed relationships with. Elphaba leaves so that Glinda can fulfill her role as the good witch. Glinda is now a much wiser and a much more humble person. She can do a lot of good in the world if she stays and fulfills her calling. Jesus leaves the disciples so they can continue his dance. As the poet Anne Weems said, Christ came by and we learned his dance. The Lord does his dance on the temple floor. The Lord does his dance with a tax collector. The Lord does his dance with a woman on the streets. The Lord does his dance with all the wrong people. So come now, let's be little Christ. Let's dance in the temple. Let's dance in the city. Let's dance in the sanctuary and in the streets. Let's join hands and dance where the music leads us. And like Jesus and like Elphaba, we will defy gravity. Amen and amen.